Welcome to the Gently Used Human podcast. I'm Dr. Scott Lyons, and I'm so excited to have you join me today for a special conversation with someone who has deeply influenced how I approach life and healing, Ann Weiser Cornell. Ann is a gifted teacher, author, and leading scholar in the field of focusing, a transformative practice developed by Eugene Gendlin that helps people reconnect with their inner selves and move through life's stuck places with greater compassion. Yes, please. Ann has this incredible ability to help you feel seen, not just through her words, but through her entire presence. It is stunning. It's something I've experienced personally, and it's one of the many reasons I'm so excited for you to hear from her today. In this episode, we'll explore the practical actions Ann offers for cultivating deep listening, both to ourselves and to others. Whether it's learning to quiet your own noise or creating space for true connection, Ann's insights are simple yet profoundly healing. This episode is an invitation to slow down, take a breath, carve out some time for yourself, and heal. As you listen, allow yourself to be fully present because you deserve this moment of stillness, reflection, and self-nourishment. So let's dive in. Hi, Ann. Welcome to the Gently Used Human. It is such an honor to have you.
Oh, it's so great to be here with you.
Oh, I love you. You're the best. You're such I have worked with you and you're a colleague and just an amazing teacher, writer, theorist, curriculum developer extraordinaire. And it's just like, I'm just so honored to be in conversation with you and so excited to introduce you to the community of the gently used humans out there.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to our conversation.
Me too. And I have to say, I think of you, and the first kind of sentence that comes to mind when I think of you is one of the world's best listeners. and there's something really, there's something so profound when you meet someone who is attuned with what you're saying and not saying simultaneously and can reflect it back. And I'm wondering if you can just talk to us about the art of listening, because you have perfected it in so many different ways. And I'm so excited to dive into the subject with you.
Well, I'm appreciating you for discerning that listening is one of my key.
It's your love language.
It should be everybody's love language. Listening smooths all relationships.
Yeah.
In fact, listening heals.
Yeah.
And I believe in listening to each other, listening to the heart behind what people are saying. If we listen only to the words, we're missing the place it's coming from. And I also believe in listening to ourselves. Yeah. Giving ourselves that same kind of compassionate attention. Yeah. And I learned listening from my mentor, Eugene Gendlin, who was indeed a master listener. I met him when I was 22 years old. Wow. And he could light up a room with how well he listened to the people who asked questions. Yeah. And so on.
And is listening that way simply taking it in? Or is there an action that comes, or a way of being that comes with the listening that makes it so healing?
The very first night I met Eugene Gendlin, we had a listening group that was led by one of his students. And that man, whose name was Les Brunswick, explained the metaphor that he liked to use when he was a listener. He said, imagine that you have a calm pool inside of you. And when the other person speaks, their words and meanings fall onto your pool like a leaf falling on the water. And so what you're showing back to them is the ripples that their words made in you. But you need to be that clear pool. So often when we meet anybody, when we're in interaction, we're out in the world, we're full of our anxieties and our concerns and our worries and all of that that's going on. And that's where listening to ourselves comes in. That if
Mm.
I don't feel clear enough in myself to hear you,
Mm.
I need to turn toward those places in me that are clamoring for attention and give them some listening. And they calm down and they back up and they say, okay, now I can hear you.
Do you feel like we can do that in the midst of like an interaction? Like if you're coming to me and you're saying, Scott, like I'm really feeling sadness about the
Mm-hmm.
way the politics of America is happening, or I'm really, and which, stirs up a lot of people because we all have opinions. And I'm like, would I say to you, Anne, I need to pause for a moment to clear my pool so I can be with you? Is that how it
I
works?
would love it if you could. That would be great.
Shit, I'd love it if I could too.
But I agree that in the middle of interaction is the hardest time to pause.
Yeah.
And yet, how welcome would that be?
Mm.
Because we know how that kind of conversation can heat up.
Yeah.
And it can even make a friendship that's pretty solid start feeling a bit rocky.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I said. I can't believe what they said. And if we can say, let's take a minute.
Yeah.
Let's just give ourselves a space because there's a lot here.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that be possible.
I'd love to see that be possible. I feel like I kind of feel like we might need like the why, like why, because it's like, yeah, we could do that. But the bigger why is like, because we're working towards something, like whether it's deeper relationality or connection or something that gives me the why of like, okay, if I hold the why, I might be able to justify the pause. Because I think a lot of people in those moments might even go, well, if I pause and I don't say what's in my pond, then what I have to offer might get lost or suffocated or abandoned or something like that.
Well, you're expressing the worry that people probably have very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
But afraid that pausing means somehow giving up my right to speak and giving up the space that I have a right to take up in the world. So we'll acknowledge that. But what's the why, I believe, is that in every interaction, there's the potential for something new to emerge. Where it's not just I have an idea that's fixed and you have an idea that's fixed and will clash if they don't match.
Yeah.
But if we can listen, something new will be created. Those wonderful conversations where you say, oh, never thought of it that way before. And have you seen it this way? And the other person says, oh. And we feel that something is emerging because we're talking to each other. That's one of the whys.
Yeah. I mean, even as you say that, and of those who are listening, you hear like the tonicity and the compassion in Anne's voice, and maybe even take a moment to notice in yourself, like, what does that do for you? I can say, Anne, having known you for years, and like every time we talk, there's a way in which you language, and there's a tonicity and a spaciousness, a pacing that I go, oh, no matter what's here, even if there's tension on both sides, which I've never had with you, but even if there was tension,
it could happen. Yeah.
Let's try it someday. Theoretically. And I'm like, oh, there's still a bridge of relationality. And there's something about not that bridge not being fragmented. And actually, like, there's a wholeness that I experience in myself and in between us with that sort of compassionate pacing and tonicity and a very particular style of languaging, which I want to go into in a little bit.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
You have a PhD in linguistics, so language is your jam.
Language is it.
And, but I will say, as we go back to that idea that listening in this way, because I don't think it's just like, okay, I heard what you said. There's an embodiment, there's a sharedness in the listening. And I know that, like, in terms of some of the research and the science on that, when we feel validated, when we feel met or felt, there's a part of our brain that lights up that also stimulates a relaxation response. So our muscles relax, we breathe deeper, and which allows us to feel even more of that connectivity to ourselves and each other, which is just phenomenal, all through this thing we call listening.
Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah, it is. So what are some of the ways in which, if someone's coming in and they meet you and they're like, wow, you're such a good listener, how would you teach them some of the art of that and some of the language skills? I know it's not just language, but language matters.
Well, one of my biggest secrets is not to ask questions.
Oh.
And you just asked me a question, and that's okay, because that's the kind of conversation we're having. Yeah. But if you really want to facilitate the other person to bring out what matters to them, try not using questions.
Okay.
Because questions, if you study questions, and I have, they imply that the answer is already there as a kind of formed object that's ready to be transmitted, or like a package ready to be handed over. And that's true of simple questions like, how old are you? Or where are you from? Or what did you study? But if you want to ask a question that invites the other person to pause and sense in them, let's say it another way, because if I say, how do you feel in your body right now?
Do you want me to answer that?
People, I want you to notice what happens when I ask, how do you feel in your body? And then notice what happens when I say, take some time to notice how you feel in your body right now. And was there a difference?
Yeah. So if you were asking me, as you did, and everyone who's listening, how do I feel in my body? There's a way in which I feel like I'm searching, I guess. I have to kind of dig in, and it makes me kind of almost like outside myself, trying to witness. And I would say, and then the other option from the question is notice what's happening in you. So it's more of a direction.
It takes some time to notice.
And it feels spacious, I guess. It feels spacious of just like, and I feel more connected to the feeling than watching it. I don't know if that's for everyone.
I don't know if that's for everyone, but when I was first working with clients, and I like you, work somatically with people. So I'm always wanting them to feel their bodies.
Yeah.
And I noticed that a fair percent of the time when I ask people, so how are you feeling in your body right now? They would say, I don't know.
Yeah, very much so.
Or nothing. I feel nothing. Yeah. And then if I took that as feedback and started asking instead, hey, let's take some time. Just let awareness come to your body. Notice how you're feeling there. I got almost nobody saying, I don't know, or I feel nothing. And then I realized, there's something about questions. And I once told a group about this, and one of the people in the group was an interviewer by profession. They worked for a journal, and they would go to people and they would interview them and write up profiles for the journal. They said, I don't know how I can do my work without questions. I said, I don't either. And then the next time I saw that person, they said, I tried doing an interview without questions, and it was great.
Wow.
So rather than saying, how was it to work with such and such a guitarist? They said, so I imagine there's a lot going on when you work with such and such a guitarist. And that is like an invitational prompt. And more came when they said it that way instead of as a question.
Do we know why? Why it works that way?
If you look at the mechanics of conversation, questions create a strong, how do I put this? They put a strong restraint on the person being asked the question. Only a few responses are then possible. And so questions are actually a pretty, I won't say manipulative exactly, but they narrow the choices of the next person to speak.
Wow. And so an invitation.
An invitation widens the choices of the next person to speak. Yeah. And that feels more relaxed and allows more to happen in that relaxed space. Because a question kind of puts pressure on you, basically, is what I'm saying.
Wow.
And under pressure, it's a little harder. One feels like one has to come up with something. And it's a narrower situation to be in.
Yeah. And so the invitation that way, it sounds like it has to have a certain level of openness and vagueness so as not to be too directive either. Like, I imagine that's hard for people to understand sometimes. Or
there you go.
Imagine that brings up. I imagine
you can even say, I'm
up.
wondering how it was for you to meet that such and such a person. Yeah. So as long as it's not in the technical question form that starts with the verb and has the noun come second,
it's more open and spacious.
It's got that open, spacious quality. Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, I've studied with you as well, so I know that it does have a really profound effect in a session too. I will say still like a few questions here and there.
But I have no objection to questions.
I know you don't.
but let's use them awarely.
Yeah.
And questions can be very facilitative. I don't want to create an atmosphere where people are afraid to ask questions around me. But questions, the other thing is that in my work, I want people not to necessarily be looking at me. It's not a conversation between me and my client. I'm facilitating my client's inner conversation. I hope they'll have their eyes closed. I hope they'll be listening in the body to something emerging from there. The other thing I noticed was if I asked a question, the person would open their eyes and answer me. So questions also call people into relationship, which could be great, but not always. If what you hope is the person will stay in a quiet inner contact and let the next meanings that come to them come from there, then no questions. Anyway, that's one of the linguistic things that I like to do.
I love that. I love that unpacking and deconstruction of questions and suggestions in that way. Yeah, I'm wondering if it's okay. So here's the invitation for someone to share, either through a question or the invitational language. I imagine listening also has to do with how we respond or how we're with someone.
Oh, yes.
And so how do we become first better listeners with someone else? And then I want to go into how do we become better listeners for ourselves?
Let's talk about both of those. Well, what's going on in me when I am hearing another person speak? Am I immediately thinking whether I agree or disagree? Am I immediately evaluating what they say as good or bad, right or wrong? Am I interpreting? Am I judging? Well, any of those things will interfere with listening.
Yeah.
So we're back to the clear pool.
Yeah.
Which is if my entire intention at this moment is just to get what you're saying, to get how it is for you, then I don't need to evaluate or judge or agree or disagree. I can be a good listener to somebody I completely disagree with.
Yeah.
Because the first thing I need to do is get how it is for you. And if I can say it back to you in a way you agree I got it, then I can say, well, and I wonder if you'd like to hear how it is from my side. So we can first hear, first listen, and later do all those other things we might otherwise do.
Yeah. I mean, I really, again, appreciate, and just for everyone who's listening, that's not an easy task. I mean, it's easier if you're a practitioner or a therapist, but when you're in a conversation with a parent or a lover or a friend, it can be like,
well, that's the hardest of all. But practice where it's easy. And then it will spill over into those places. And I first learned listening. I wasn't a therapist. I wasn't in training to be a therapist. I was a linguistics graduate student. And I was 22 years old and my emotional life was a complete mess. But I was really drawn to these moments because the people who met Eugene Gendlin back then formed a community with each other. We had a practice of forming listening pairs, partnerships.
Yeah.
I'll listen to you for 20 minutes And then for the next 20 minutes, you listen to me.
Yeah.
Well, that is an amazing practice.
I want to take a moment to give a loud shout out to the Embody Lab, which is one of the most incredible resources for body-based and somatic therapies. This show is all about healing, and the Embody Lab does exactly that. Whether you're on your own journey of transformation and discovery, or enhancing your skill sets in your career as like a coach or a therapist, a body worker, or really any career where you are supporting other gently used humans, the Embody Lab is your place for deep, inspiring, and impactful workshops, certificates, masterclasses, and an incredible community of like-minded folks. I love the Embody Lab, and so do so many other people that call it a platform to come home to over and over again. The Embody Lab is giving my listeners an exclusive offer, a one-time 10% off code to enhance your embodied well-being. All you have to do is go to theembodylab.com and use the code GentlyUse10 at checkout. In the reflection from what someone is sharing, so you clear the pond, so to speak, as best you can. Be a clear pool
as much as you can.
Be a clear pool.
That's right.
And then how do we phrase it back to people so that they actually feel heard? I know that we talked about in the beginning, like things are, you reflect back things that are said and not said, but is there a way we do it that really goes, oh yeah, that's going to help them feel really heard?
We might start with what the person is doing right now. And what I mean by doing is every time someone speaks, they're also taking action. And often that's an action of speaking. Yeah. But for instance, let's take what you said to me. You asked, or you speculated, you were exploring, how do we do it? I might say back to you, you're wondering how we do it. So the first thing I say to you is you. And the second thing is a verb of what you're doing right now. You're wondering would be an example.
Yeah.
You're wanting to explore, or you're curious about, or you're feeling bothered by. And if people say, right now my chest is tight, I might say, you're sensing your chest is tight. So your sensing is a very facilitative way to start a listening response, if that's what the person is doing. Or, I wanted to tell you about this thing that happened to me yesterday. Okay, yeah, that's what you'd like to do. You want to tell me about that. All right. You're remembering what happened to you yesterday. And then get it in their words or your own words.
Yeah.
And then listening isn't complete until you say it, I hear it, and then you check if I'm right.
Yeah.
And I'm understanding that third step is actually part of the success of listening. If somebody says, well, no, that actually it's more this way.
Yeah.
And I'm happy.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't my goal to get it so right that they didn't have to add anything. My goal is to have this ongoing conversation where if I say something, they check, they go take it back inside. And what I said back to them helps them sense what's next. Or it's more closely, or it's closer to this.
Yeah.
This is more what it's like.
Yeah. Kind of mutually finding the right fit of
the right fit is a beautiful phrase for this. That's right. And it's part of the magic is that when people speak, it's only the tip of the iceberg, you could say. That what you say comes from a bigger place in you that's more than your words. And we don't know yet what that more is until we start.
Yeah. And it's like the more we can get just past the iceberg, so to speak, in our reflecting and our listening and our sharing with someone, the greater they feel felt and seen and heard, which is just our these primal needs that we just have as humans that are so often missed. I mean, so often missed, and become sort of the driver for so many other tactics we have in our life that don't always end up working for us.
I know you have a lot of wisdom on this, Scott.
Yeah.
Yes, the things people do to try to be seen, to try to substitute for what we really need, right?
Yeah. And truly, as a culture, we are not as acclimated or as trained or taught how to really truly listen, which is why I'm so impassioned by your work, because it's we can it can feel kind of ethereal, or if you can just listen to someone, we can change the world. But it actually changes. Yeah. It's how we do it. And it changes the physiology. It changes so quickly. The moment, for those of you who are listening, just think of a moment when you felt really, truly heard and seen and felt and connected by someone, and see how that feels in your body. See how that felt then and now. And that change that is just so palpable does impact not only your inner culture and your inner environment and ecosystem, but then it ripples into the ecosystem around you.
Hope people are thinking of a time like that, because yes, it's magical how much it can change.
So we've really been able to get to these pieces of okay, it's about the right question if it's relational, or the right invitational language, the act of being with someone with that clear pond, or as clear as we can get, the way we reflect it back to someone else to feel heard and seen. And now, how do we start to do that for ourselves? Because here's the thing, we can chase for the whole rest of our life. Our unmet needs can be in the driver's seat of everything we do, as that little kid is trying to be seen, heard, and felt by everyone with whatever tactics. But damn, the moment we can pause that car and go and do it for ourselves, something really transformative happens.
That's right.
And so how do we start to do that?
We need to understand that we have depths. We have more to us than we think. And that needs an environment, an atmosphere. When I was growing up, I had a nice childhood. Parents loved me, but they never, as far as I can recall, were interested in what was inside me. How did you do in school? How was it to be with your friends? But not, what are you going through? What are you feeling? And so I didn't have a model, an environment in which I realized that there was something going on inside me that I could explore, that I could get to know. The only place I touched it when I was growing up was when I wrote poetry. Then I could maybe feel that more inside me. But when I was about 22 years old, after my first year of grad school in linguistics, I went through a rough breakup. I had a boyfriend. We broke up in a way that really was my fault. In other words, I did some things that led to the breakup. And he was hurt, and I was hurt, and potentially other people would have been hurt. And when all the pieces fell and settled to the ground and we were apart and so on, I had enough self-awareness to think, oh my gosh, I didn't like that guy. I wasn't aware that I didn't even like him. So I had to go through all of that to get away from him. And then I thought to myself, I'd really like a way to get to know myself better, because I feel like there's something in here that's going to go after what it wants, whether I'm consciously aware of it or not. And I'd better become aware of it. And it was just a few months after that I found myself in the room where Eugene Gendlin was teaching listening and focusing.
Mm.
And focusing, it turns out, is a way of listening to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of understanding that there's more to you than your conscious thoughts and your habits and your reactivity and your assumptions.
Mm.
There's more to you, but it takes a little while to pause and slow down and get in touch with it. And you use the body to do that.
Mm.
So if we just stay up in our thoughts, we're going to have repetitive thoughts, repetitive reactions, go with our assumptions. But if we pause and come down into the body, there's something more there that can be touched and opened. And there was a community around Eugene Gendlin, as I mentioned before, where people were exchanging listening turns. One person would listen. The other person would be focusing, meaning slowing down, pausing, and sensing. I began to feel like I'd been starving and dying of thirst all my life, and I was finally being fed and given water. The same thing you were just talking about, Scott, that human need to be met, the human need to be seen as more than just our surfaces, as somebody with complexity, somebody worth listening to.
Mm.
And the first time I heard somebody say to me, yeah, so, but how was that for you?
Mm.
I'd never received that invitation before. Would have been so great if my mom or my dad or my teachers had said, well, how was that for you, my dear?
Mm.
As far as I was concerned, they didn't know I had anything inside.
Mm.
So there is this world inside us that we can get in touch with when we pause, when we don't just accept the surface, when we don't just, well, this is my favorite color, and this is the band I like, and this is just assume that we're going to be forever the way we have been. But pausing and sensing. And it turns out that focusing is a way of healing trauma.
Uh-huh.
It's a way of having better relationships.
Yeah.
And that eventually, after I taught linguistics for a little while, I went back and focusing became my life work.
As you talk about, thank you for sharing that story. And I really hear in that process of like, the thing we initiate sometimes, like breakups, when we can't even attune to ourselves, or we annihilate or create unintentional chaos or crisis when it's like we haven't had the chance to look in and just be like, I'm not happy here, or I need something different.
Yeah.
And as you start to tune in, as you did, and as you've been teaching people for so many years how to do that as well, and you talk about what's underneath the surface, what is underneath the surface? Is it just body sensations like, ooh, my heart is beating faster, my breath is shallow, or what else might be there for us to excavate or discover?
What's there is meaning. Body contains meaning. Let's take emotions, for example.
Yeah.
Sometimes people talk about emotions as if there's just 5 or 6 of them, like anger, fear, joy, and that's all. I hate those movies, by the way. Because that's just not how I think people actually work, is by having these single emotions that walk around making choices in our life.
Yeah.
The way you feel has more to it. So you can take something like flying in a plane makes me anxious.
Okay.
And then turn toward the feeling of anxious in the body and check the word anxious. Is anxious really right? And it turns out that as you sit with the feeling in the body, the word anxious isn't quite right. Well, maybe it's unsafe. Oh, okay. And then you check again. Is unsafe right? Then there's more underneath that. Well, it's unsafe because I can feel I have a longing to have solid ground under me. Okay, turn back to that again and get to know the feel of the longing for solid ground. Oh, yes. I start with longing for solid ground, and under that I can feel that has to do with my community, my relationships. It's a longing that I feel. So it's like unpeeling an onion.
It is.
There are layers underneath anything we're feeling that are more subtle, more intricate, and so on.
And sometimes that meaning emerges as clear as you named it, like in words or sensations or feelings. Sometimes it's imagery or abstract images or something like that. So it's like there's a whole language of meaning and experience that doesn't always just have like a single clear sentence. It can emerge as like this pointy, prickly pear, like mountainous feeling in me that's like a mountain with all it is a slope or something like that.
Lovely. Yeah. Well, the point of the work that Gendlin did, and he had done research into successful psychotherapy.
Yeah.
What they found was that clients who were going to be successful in their therapy tended to do something different in the very first session.
What was
and
it?
that was that they paused and became aware of something they were feeling that wasn't clear, that wasn't easy to put into words. Yeah. And clients who could just articulately speak about their problems and their emotions and their families, blah, 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 those weren't the ones that tended to do well in therapy. But people who could at some point, I don't know how to say this. Gosh, that pointed to success in therapy. Wow. So the dimension below the ways we always think, the ways we've interpreted our life, the stories we've told ourselves, the dimension below that is at first unclear. And so to be able to tolerate, I don't know what I'm feeling right now, but I do feel it right here in my chest. To be able to tolerate the I don't know yet and then stay with it a while is something that's very valuable to learn.
Yeah. I think my deepest experiences in any type of therapy sessions were those moments where, that's so frustrating as a client when you hear the therapist go, and can we pause here and be with what
Let's
is
pause and
here.
Be with this vague, unclear,
and you're just like, no, I want to tell the story. I want to rage. I want to like say they did it, or and it's like, or blame myself, or do any of these techniques to sort of avoid sitting in the unknown potential for meaning.
That's right.
Because with that is going to come a slew of images or feelings and sensations that we don't necessarily have like this control over that we would like. And they're just going to have to ride through us.
And we need fresh metaphors to describe them, like the prickliness you were describing a moment ago, or the slope. With the fresh metaphors, I don't have a word for this. I'm going to have to invent new language, images, metaphors to say what it feels like right now. But in what it feels like, all these new, fresh possibilities emerge. Life isn't meant to be stuck. We're not meant to be going over and over the same ideas, the same addictions, the same problems, falling into the same kind of stuck relationships. That's not what life is for. Yeah. It's meant for new possibilities, for growth, for next steps to come. Yeah. But the place where the next steps come from is this at first very vague and unclear, and somewhere in the body I feel like something. Speaking of language, I want to mention my favorite word. Yeah. The word that I believe is the most facilitative word in any language, because I've taught around the world. It's the word something.
Something's here.
Something is here. I'm feeling something. I can't describe it yet, but there's something.
This show is also brought to you by the absolutely stunning and powerful tools of transformation that are created by Omala. Oof, even the name Omala transports you to a place of flow and vitality. These are some of my favorite products ever. They have an amazing color-changing yoga mat that responds to your temperature and presence and reflects back your posture in real time. There's this incredible smelling skin balm candle that heats up to activate all the essential oils and vitamins that your skin has been craving. I mean, look, if I could live in a giant bath of this candle, I would 100% do it. They also have these journals that lead you into profound insight, and then you get to plant those journals to create a stunning flower garden. What? I mean, if that's not deep and inventive, I don't know what is. If you're someone who desires to live a luxurious flow of life and who believes in transformative wellness, then you have to check out Omala. Omala is giving my listeners an exclusive discount to treat yourself to something that is as special as you, boo. All you have to do is go to omala.com, that's OMALA.com, and use the code DrScott10 at checkout. And a portion of every purchase goes to an incredible charity. You got this. I love that word too, especially when you're like in reflecting back to someone, like something's really here for you. And it's just beautiful. Such a like, you see them just melt of like, as though you said the exact thing that's there, but it's something such a vague word.
It's deliberately vague. It's the ultimate in vagueness.
Yes.
And for that reason, it holds an accepting space for anything to come.
It's vague and inclusive.
Yeah.
I love that. Wow. I really, again, like I appreciate so much your ways of helping people not only be in dialogue in a way that just feels more in relation. Because I think, when you're doing couples work or when you have a patient come in or a client come in, the thing that I hear the most, and it's not what I hear, it's what I feel and see. It's like in the need for connection and the arguments that happen, there is disconnection.
Yeah.
And so the art of staying with oneself, with another person, and still be in relationship, like the radicalness that I could be angry and love someone simultaneously.
We all know that way.
We all know
that place, don't we?
And to see the difference between I can either be angry or in love with you. And it doesn't establish that place, a bridge that we actually are seeking through the argument or seeking in our greatest primal intention.
You're right. There is an art to being able to have and feel myself at the same time. I'm creating a clear pool for you.
Yeah.
And when I first tried to learn to do this, I felt like somebody had asked me to pat my head and rub my stomach at the same time. Like, I don't know how to do both these things. I could do this one or that one, but how do I do both?
Yeah.
But it's possible.
Yeah.
And now I've got it. I'm talking to you. I'm interested in what you're saying. And I'm also aware, how am I right now? And it's something we really need when we're in relationships that matter to us, whether they're collegial or therapeutic or friendly or romantic. We need to have ourselves at the same time having an openness to sensing how it is for the other. Mm-hmm.
Oof. If you're listening and you're like, wait, what the fuck is that? You're in good company, my friends. It is, I think it's a really, just to normalize, it's an unfamiliar process for most to be able to be with themselves as fully as they can and be with another person. It for many of us, it feels like a tug of war. It just feels
absolutely
like such an battle.
I remember when it was impossible. When being with another person, especially a romantic object, I was just empty. There was no me.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of disappear into that other person. Or I didn't even want to. I just did. So it was a long road from that to start realizing, no, I want to be aware of myself. I don't want to disappear. And if you've been in relationships like that from either side, no, everybody loses, because you really want a relationship where two fully aware people are coming together.
Yeah. That is a real thing, right? I'm just kidding. How did?
Yes.
Oh, Lord.
Doesn't mean no fights and arguments.
Thank you for normalizing, because all of that's, conflict still happens. Conflict is actually part of relationship. It can even deepen relationship. How long did it take you to find that, Ann? Like, what was your journey in tools?
About 50 years.
Oh, shit. So there. Do you feel like, what were some of the major tools that helped you find you in relationship?
Well, these processes that I teach are the very things that I did. And I felt like they mattered so much to me to teach, because they were life and breath in my personal life. I was confronted. I had to learn how to listen to myself. I even swore off relationships for years so that I would have enough time and space to get to know myself. And I mean, one can't completely swear off friendships, but closer romantic relationships. I said, I'm gonna give myself a break from all that, because I don't like that way that disappearing felt.
Yeah.
I no longer want to do that. And in order to not do that anymore, I think I need to spend the time to feel what it's like to be with myself, to know myself, to be present with myself in all these different situations.
Yeah.
And the worst of it is that when I began to get to know myself, I found things in there that I didn't like.
Oh.
I felt like when I first began to go inside and go deeper and deeper, it was like, if you're in a forest and you turn over a rock, and then on the underside of the rock are all these slimy, crawly things, and you turn the rock back over again real quick. I felt like that's what I was finding inside myself. Things that other people would find disgusting and that I found shameful. Well, here's an example that I can remember of one of those disgusting, shameful things that I found. I found it while I was with one of these listening partners. And I found it, and then I was thinking, I can't say that out loud, because this nice person's going to run horrified from the room.
Yeah.
But then I did say it out loud, and they just said it back to me. And what was it?
What?
It was, I want to be loved. I want to be loved. Can you imagine? Inside me, that had become something shameful that I was afraid people would be disgusted by. I was afraid that if people saw that I wanted to be loved, they would be like, oh, well, I've got something else to do, don't I? And now, of course, I feel so much love and compassion for that younger me who felt that way. So the answer is, you might feel like when you go inside and you get to know yourself better and you find things inside that are really true, at first they may seem shameful, horrifying, disgusting, but they may be the very things that point to your humanity and your needs and what always would have been right along the way. It would have been right if I'd grown up knowing it was okay to want to be loved. Wouldn't it? Yeah.
Oh, Ann, that's so beautiful and heartbreaking, because I know. Because I think so many of us can relate to that can feel that ache of like, whether it's in the phrase of like, I want to be loved, and feeling like, oh, that there's shame around that. Or, for me, like my inner script for so long was, I'm a burden. I'm just such a burden.
Yeah,
and like,
there you go.
and to be able to like the moment we can voice it. And I remember I was with a beautiful practitioner who was just such a great listener. And she said to me, even that part is welcome here. And it was just like, oh, thank you. Because the parts of us that are so, that we develop in our belief systems around that, and there's shame around that, we tuck and we hide, but it's still in the driver's seat for so long.
Yeah.
And to like,
you can't really get rid of anything. You can't become good by cutting off parts of yourself. We try to, but it doesn't work.
No. I mean, it just furthers the abandonment that we probably all, that was part of the not being seen, heard, listened to, felt, that produced some of the ideology or beliefs that then become the fuel of our own engine unintentionally.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. So no exclusion. Everything is included. I love what that wonderful person said to you. That part is welcome too. This is about welcome.
That's the parallel here that I'm hearing, is like a really beautiful listening includes welcoming them, what's here, into the space, to not be exiled.
It includes belonging. And as you yourself just said, not abandoning any aspect of ourselves.
Yeah.
There isn't anything in us that can hurt us. Everything in you is trying to save you, has been trying to help you all along.
Yeah.
Back to that night, I first met Eugene Gendlin at the community center.
Yeah.
The first words I heard him say, he was speaking to the whole group.
Yeah.
He said, and the name of the group was Changes. So he said, this is Changes. If you're here, you belong here. And his arms went out wide. And so if you're here, you belong here.
Yeah.
That becomes a way of living.
Yeah.
And it heals the wounds so many of us have about feeling like an outsider.
Yeah.
Not belonging, not welcome, not allowed.
Yeah. I love, there's like Gabor Mate's work, other people who have really looked at that the opposite of addiction, for example, is not sobriety, it's belonging.
Lovely. That's
and
great.
You know, belonging is so much the salve of so many wounds. And we know, like, you know, in the endemic of loneliness and the diseases and the you know, the effects of loneliness on our physiology are so profound that we're an endemic of it. And the salve of belonging. And I think, you know, I don't know about you, Ann, but I, you know, in the search for belonging, looked everywhere else. Like every fucking where else I could.
Except inside yourself.
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, you don't just belong to yourself. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So you have to go belong to this group or this community. And there is a way in which we can experience that belonging outside. But if you're not home, as we were just talking about, if you're not home, then there's no one to meet you there.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. There's a teaching story, I forget what tradition it's in, that maybe God and her angels were saying, well, we want to give humans the secret of all life, but we want to hide it somewhere so that they won't come across it until they're really ready. So where on earth can we hide it? Can we put it in the deepest ocean? No. Can we put it in the highest mountain? No. I know. We'll put it inside each person's heart.
And how long does it take us? And what does it take us? And what are the tools that it takes us?
Till we go there. We go there. You know, so often I meet people who, when they start bringing awareness inside and they start finding emotional states like anger, resentment, and shame especially, that they start evaluating and judging and say, I shouldn't feel that way. I'm going to try not to feel that way. Craving and longing, that too.
Yeah.
What if instead of evaluating how we feel, we simply say hello to how we feel? Hello, I know you're there.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning. You don't even have to say, I love and accept all my feelings. Just say hello.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening, I love this as a practice. I love it. And thank you, Anne, for even bringing it into the space of just saying, like, take a moment to pause and place your hands on your body, perhaps just to like affirm where you are, and then dropping the hello in like a little pebble into a pond, maybe even a clear pond if it's there. And just to even feel the ripple effect of saying hello. And even the possibility of a response without, and maybe then the possibility of no response, but still the profoundness of that ripple of effect of saying hello. It really is. It's one of my favorite practices, actually, especially in those moments. Yeah, it's so simple. And especially in those moments of feeling alone it's like hearing my own voice inside. And the resonance of that is like an echo chamber of belonging.
So true.
Your work and your new book on untangling, how we transform and shift out of stuckness. Is this the pathway that you help so many people through in this process of untangling?
Right. Untangling, the new book I wrote with my colleague, Barbara McGavin. Barbara and I have been creating this work together for 30 years.
Wow.
And it started when she and I were about to teach together, teach focusing.
Yeah.
But we had to face the fact that focusing actually hadn't helped us with the toughest problems in our lives. And like I'd been a focusing teacher for, 15, 20 years. And I was using alcohol addictively. And my alcohol use had been increasing.
Yeah.
Despite being a internationally known teacher of this self-help awareness method. And Barbara was in a similar situation, but her life challenge was that she often felt so low self-esteem, such low self-esteem that she even sometimes thought she'd better disappear. And through a series of circumstances, we happened to confront these two issues right at the time we were about to teach together. Although focusing hadn't helped us with them up till that time. We didn't have any other tools, so we thought, let's try focusing with this. And in every free moment when we weren't teaching, we were sitting across from each other, exchanging focusing turns, and trying to feel together, what does this process need? What do these hugely stuck situations need? Almost immediately, we started saying, we need to be with the part that wants to drink. We need to be with the part that wants to die. Yeah. And we need to be with it. So I needed to be with the part that wants to drink and get drunk, but not from a judging place or frightened if I keep doing that, terrible things will happen place. I needed to find a place to be with it that was a good listener. And that meant I also needed to say hello to the frightened and worried part of me that if I don't stop doing this, terrible things are going to happen. Yeah. So I had two parts to say hello to, the one that wanted to drink and the one that wanted to kill the one that wanted to drink. Yeah. But I wasn't either of those. I was able to develop the ability with Barbara's help to be a kind of neutral, friendly observer, a listener to both those sides. And when I could do that, I discovered that the part that wanted to drink actually wanted positive experiences for me. And it could even let me know what those were. It wanted me to be able to relax quickly. It wanted me to be able to be more spontaneous. It wanted me to be sensual. It wanted me to be creative. And as I was the listener to that, I began to feel in my body at that moment what it would be like to be more sensual, creative, and spontaneous in my life. And that process freed me from the part of me that thought I had to drink in order to get those experiences. Well, there's a whole more to the process than that, but it's essentially being able to be, as we said, friendly, listening to the different sides and aspects of ourselves without getting caught up in them, without getting in a fight with them, by saying first, yes, you belong here. And over time, I mean, what happened was Barbara and I both began having these insights and discoveries and life changes at the same time we were teaching. In the workshops we were teaching, sometimes people would ask us questions, and we had just recently had these new insights and understandings. We could only answer their questions from our new insights. We had to. And then the people were saying, wow, when are you going to teach that? And the following year, we were teaching this new method in retreats and saying we should write a book about that. This is 1995. So
just a few years ago.
Over the following 30 years, we taught this work all over the world in 6-day retreats over and over again. But we did never have time with our busy lives to write a book. And then the pandemic came. And in the year 2020, we canceled 5 international trips. And instead of going on those trips, we wrote our book.
Congratulations.
And yes.
And here it is.
Very proud of it. It feels like it's really my life work now out in public. Untangling how you can transform what's impossibly stuck.
And it's so practical, and there's steps, and it's really accessible. Because some of this can feel like, wait, how? If you're listening, you're like, how am I going to start to do those tools of listening with myself, or really deepen into, like, as you were saying, Ann, like the layer under the layer of meaning, under the layer of meaning, under the layer of meaning. And it is accessible, and it isn't have to happen all at once, but like the book really does take you through, like, how do you arrive to that core meaning place where that tangle of beliefs and the tangle behaviors and the tangles of pain get to unravel and be freed up again. And it's really so well done, and so happy.
Yeah, we call it getting free. It's freedom, because if we're living our addictions or our severe self-criticism, our procrastination, our imposter syndrome, we're not free.
No.
And we're meant to be. That's what our bodies are meant to be. We're meant to live lives where we have possibilities.
Yeah, beautifully said. It's such a birthright, and your work and your book is such a restoring of that birthright, of that freedom.
Well, I appreciate how often you're aware of your listeners. You're taking care of them, I can tell. And I would like to let them know that I have a free course called Get Bigger Than What's Bugging You. And it's a great way to start with these practices.
Where can they sign up for that course and find more of you, Ann? And
focusingresources.com.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your brilliant work. Thank you for your book, Untangling, how you can transform what's impossibly stuck, and all of the practices and the wisdom of so many years of teaching this and working with people, put into a place that allows people to use that as a workbook to get unstuck in their life. And it is brilliant. And you are brilliant.
Oh, no. You are such a sensitive person yourself, and I love the work that you're doing to enable people to be embodied and live from an embodied place. So
I received that. I thank you. Thank you. And to all our gently used humans out there, we love you. Thank you for listening to the Gently Used Human podcast with Dr. Scott Lyons and friends. Visit gentlyused.com for fun extras. And don't forget to spill the tea and gossip about the show with all your friends and frenemies. And show some love by giving us 5 stars and leaving a review in your favorite apps. This helps us connect with all the other gently used humans out there. Oh, and by the way, you look fierce today.